If Bob Mueller and his small U.S. Attorney's Office, as I've heard it described today, does go beyond the 2016 election and get into Trump organization finances unrelated to the 2016 election and really unrelated to Russian coordination, if it even exists, I think that would be crossing a red line. I think that's when that the Deputy Attorney General, who's the acting Attorney General for the purpose of this investigation, Rod Rosenstein, who I served with in the Bush administration, he needs to step in and pull the reins back on Bob Mueller if he starts to go outside of those bounds of his delegation of authority.
The left is trying to sow this theory that essentially Russians interfered with the U.S. election, which has been proven false. They did not have any impact in the election, and that has been very clear from the Obama administration.
All right, we can stop. Let me just stop you right there, Mr. Acting Attorney General. Stating as a matter of fact that it's been proven that the Russians did not interfere goes against everything the U.S. intelligence agency
Could I ask you, Willie,
again and again.
What was the FBI's conclusion?
There was interference by the Russians.
Okay, but what was the Director of National Intelligence? And again, all of these people appointed by Donald Trump. What was the DNI's conclusion?
There was interference in the election.
Okay, but you know what? That Director of Homeland Security, she seems like a really close Trump ally. What did she say?
There was interference in the election. I'll just give you an all of the above.
Could I ask you, was she the one that said that actually American democracy is at risk because of the Russian interference?
Yes, even she said so. And by the way, those comments you just heard, those are made by the man tapped by President Trump to replace Jeff Sessions as the acting Attorney General to oversee the Russia investigation. Matthew Whitaker is his name. Despite growing calls for Whitaker to recuse himself from overseeing Robert Mueller's Russia probe, Whitaker apparently has no plans to do so. The Washington Post, citing people close to the acting Attorney General, reports Whitaker will not take himself out of that position. The Post says those sources also do not believe Whitaker would approve any subpoena of President Trump as part of the investigation.
What was that bathtub that he was trying to sell? Because I was watching TV with the volume down last night.
Steve Bannon?
And he kept trying to sell. No,
that was
Steve Bannon was the one that when he left the apartment, there had been acid in the bathtub.
I still have a lot of questions about that.
Why did he destroy that?
What are you trying to clean?
What did he dissolve in? I mean, I saw Breaking Bad. That usually, that's usually used for.
I want to cast aspersions. But
no, I'm not.
That's a heavy-duty chemical.
You could just do Clorox or just like Windex.
You sound like you have experience. You need to clean a scene, just Clorox.
No, I just no, but like if you give the dog a bath, you might want to use something
spick and span
stronger.
Sure.
Scrubbing bubbles, they work, so you don't have to.
That's a good product.
That is a good product.
So Whitaker also has previously called it a witch hunt, right? The Mueller investigation. He retweeted last year an article that called it a lynch mob. He is on the record very clearly saying that this has no legitimacy, the Mueller investigation. And now he oversees it, and now he says he will not recuse himself.
So the FTC said he was involved in a scam that robbed people of their life savings. What was that about?
Well, I mean,
because all I saw was like a visual of like a bathtub.
Go to our next guest, Willie.
It seems there's always something, right? There's always some ethical question with these appointments. Joining us now is the former acting U.S. Solicitor General in the Obama administration, a current professor of law at Georgetown University, attorney Neil Katyal. Neil, good morning. Neil has co-written another op-ed with attorney George Conway, husband of Kellyanne Conway. The latest piece in the New York Times is entitled, "Trump's Appointment of the Acting Attorney General is Unconstitutional." In it, they argue this: Mr. Whitaker has not been named to some junior post 1 or 2 levels below the Justice Department's top job. He now has been vested with the law enforcement authority of the entire United States government. We cannot tolerate such an evasion of the Constitution's very explicit, textually precise design. Senate confirmation exists for a simple and good reason. Constitutionally, Matthew Whitaker is a nobody. So, Neil, explain that a little bit. What in the Constitution would prevent Whitaker from being the acting Attorney General? Obviously, he has not gone through any Senate confirmation process, for starters.
Yeah, so, I'm kind of old school about this. I've always kind of thought attorneys generals need to be confirmed by the Senate, that you couldn't just install your own lackey in. And by old school, I mean, I'm just talking about the founding design of the Constitution. And that's really what the piece I wrote with George Conway is about, which is, why do we have this thing called Senate confirmation? Because in Article 2 of our Constitution, it says that the president can't install heads of the department on his own, that that there's a whole deep reason for this. And Justice Thomas, who happens to be the president's favorite justice, just wrote an opinion about this a couple of years ago, and he said, look, our founders are worried about maybe we're going to have a corrupt president one day, and you can't just have him install his lackeys in as heads of the department, because that would destroy the checks and balances in the executive branch itself.
You know, it's interesting, Neil, that there are quite a few conservatives, not just conservative attorneys and conservative constitutional scholars, but even rank-and-file, hardcore conservatives like Eric Erickson, who says, just to be clear, you can have an acting attorney general like Sally Yates, but you cannot have an acting attorney general who has not been through a confirmation process for an AG position. Yates was confirmed as a deputy AG. Whitaker has not. And of course, there's a professor and a constitutional lawyer who, you know, was about as expansive for George W. Bush in framing presidential authority. And even he came out saying, wait, this is so unconstitutional. A president does not have this authority.
Yeah, that's 100% right. So obviously, you can have emergency situations, and the attorney general dies or is forced out or something like that. You need to have someone temporarily to fill their place. But that's always been understood to be someone who is Senate confirmed. And here you've got a whole bunch of people who are Senate confirmed, like the deputy attorney general, like the solicitor general. And when Congress confirms those people, they know, well, one day those people could step in if the attorney general is resigned or something like that. But we've never had a situation like this, certainly not in our lifetimes, in which the president kind of reaches down into the bowels of the Justice Department to pick his lackey, skipping over all the people in the line of succession at the Justice Department, which is actually something enumerated by law, by Congress. I think there's a deeper fundamental problem here, which is it really underscores this president's constitutional insouciance. You know, when I served in the Justice Department, I have twice now, I think one of the things we thought the most about was, look, you have these emergency authorities. You can use them in terrorism and cabinet, things and all sorts of stuff. But you have to be really circumspect in using them, because those laws are written broadly for a reason, which is there may be some real crisis. What's the crisis here that requires skipping over the people in the Justice Department who've been Senate confirmed? There's only one crisis, and it looks like Donald Trump. He's afraid of Mueller. He's afraid of what's going on, and so he's willing to break the Constitution to stop it.
And you know, that California lawyer, that conservative lawyer that worked for George W. Bush, who offended so many liberals, John Yoo at Berkeley, Susan, of all people, saying, no, wait, come on. Listen, I'm for expansive presidential powers, but this is not close. This is unconstitutional.
Right, and I guess what
I think that.
Sorry,
I was going to say, I think that really underscores the kind of George Conway and I are writing this. We do not see things eye to eye. We come from other sides of the political spectrum. But the Constitution is profoundly a bipartisan document. And absolutely, I think you can get scholars on the left and right, and even ordinary citizens who say, what is this? I mean, how can the president just bypass our fundamental parts of our Constitution? And maybe, again, if you're in a time of war, you need it for some emergency reason. What's the emergency here that could possibly justify doing this?
Susan.
Now, just two quick questions. One is, can the DOJ ethics lawyers say that he must recuse himself? And even if Trump wants to fight that and has to go through the courts, how much damage, one could say damage, or how long can Trump go and hurt the Mueller investigation before this is all settled in the courts?
So there is an ethics office, and in general, that office does opine on these things. I mean, and so ordinarily they would opine and say you can or can't do this. Evidently, that happened with Sessions and Rosenstein. Right. But, unfortunately, the Trump administration is bent on destroying the Justice Department and the career officials. So I just don't know, how much faith we can put in that. And then your other question is, how much damage could Whitaker do? He could do immense damage. He may have already done it just in the last 24 hours. He could turn over Mueller's files to Trump. I mean, he is the Attorney General, vested with all of the awesome powers that that office entails, including putting people to death and supervising all prosecutors in this country, even the 94 who are Senate confirmed, and yes, including supervising Robert Mueller. This is a constitutional crisis.
Putting it that way, it sounds very daunting. Katty Kay.
So, Neil, the checks and balances are built into the system. You're writing with Mr. Conway that this is unconstitutional. I guess the question then is what happens next? Where does the power lie now to stop the president from being able to put Whitaker, who's not been confirmed, into this position?
I think there's three paths. One is what we're starting to see yesterday with the protests all over, which is citizens rising up and saying, of all political stripes, and saying, what in the world is going on? We cannot do this. We believe in the rule of law in this country. That's number one. Number two is Congress. Remember on Tuesday, something pretty dramatic happened. Donald Trump is now facing a House of Representatives controlled by Democrats, and they have it fully within their power to say, we are not going to fund the Justice Department while this fake Attorney General is at its helm. We're going to fund parts of it. Maybe we'll fund only the Mueller investigation. They have all sorts of things like that. And then number three is the courts. And there are litigants every day in this country who face adverse Justice Department action, criminal defendants, civil, all sorts of things. The Justice Department takes all kinds of actions in the name of the Attorney General. And any of those people can sue. Senators can sue, saying, look, my job, but the reason I ran for office is because I believed that I wanted to roll in the consent in the nomination process in confirmation hearings. You can't just bypass all of that. And when you look at what Mr. Whitaker has said in your clip, it's very clear this guy could never pass a confirmation hearing.
Wow. Neil Katyal, thank you very much for being on this morning.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.